Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We so appreciate your taking the time. We're just going to give people a minute or two just to join, and then we will get started very shortly. All right, people are still coming in. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so. All right, still coming in. All right, thanks everybody for joining. We're just going to give it another 30 seconds or so just to give people a chance to join the call, and then we will get started shortly. But so appreciate all of you taking the time this evening to join us. All righty, maybe we'll give it 10 more seconds. All righty, it seems to be slowing down. All right, welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. I hope the information we're going to talk to you about is helpful for you. Tonight's discussion, as the title suggests, we're just going to focus on APs, AP classes, AP exams, kind of what they are, and the role that they play in the college admission process. Before we dive in, just a couple quick logistical things. The first one is I'm Drew Heilpern from Summit Educational Group. I have the honor of moderating this panel discussion tonight. So they will introduce themselves shortly, but a huge shout out to them and huge thanks to them for joining us this evening. They are truly experts, and we are super lucky to have them join us this evening. But before we dive in, just a couple quick logistical things. The first one is if you have questions, please feel free to write them in the Q&A box. Just in the interest of time, we're going to hold questions to the end. And there are a lot of you out there, so we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. And the format tonight is it's going to be question and answers. So I'm going to be moderating the panel and the panel discussion and firing questions at them. So if you have a question, feel free to type it in, but just note later on in the discussion, we might circle back and answer your question more directly in our format. So use the Q&A function for that. And again, I'll keep an eye on the time tonight, keep us moving, and make sure we leave some time to circle back and answer any questions that you have. And then we are recording this. So we'll try to get the link to the recording out to you tomorrow or on Friday. So please don't feel like you have to hang on our every word tonight. We obviously will be very flattered if you do, but the real goal tonight, again, just at a high level, just you have a better understanding of what the AP landscape looks like and a little bit of a better understanding in terms of how they're being used in the college admission process. You can see on your screen there is a poll. If you don't mind just taking a minute just to fill out that poll as the panel introduces themselves, it's just helpful for us to kind of get a clearer picture of who is out there in the audience tonight. So again, thanks so much for joining us. We hope this is helpful, and I will just turn it over to the panel. Christie, do you want to go first in terms of introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Drew. Hi, everyone. My name is Christie Ruggieri. I am the Director of Global Enrollment Strategies at Northeastern University. We are a medium to large size private institution. We are a global university, so we actually have multiple campuses, not only in Boston, but Oakland, California, and London. So we really focus on hands-on learning experiences through not only taking advantage of our vast global network, but of course also our co-op program where students are able to work a full-time job and get their foot in the door in their industry that they're excited about before graduation.
Great. Christie, thank you and welcome. Clara, you want to go next?
Yeah, welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Clara Hoff. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at the University of Virginia, which we call UVA for short. UVA is a mid-sized university. We are a public university and we are located in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is about 2 hours from Washington, D.C., or about an hour and 15 minutes from Richmond, the capital city of Virginia. We are a comprehensive university, so we have programs in the liberal arts, engineering, architecture, commerce, data science, and a number of other fields. Very happy to be joining y'all tonight.
Clara, welcome. Josh, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, so I'm Josh Davis, and I'm a college counselor with GuideWell and ESM Prep. I've been counseling kind of on this side of the aisle, if you will, for over 10 years. But as a student at Yale, I was a undergraduate student recruitment coordinator. So that's how I kind of got my first taste in admissions for 3 years as a student. So just kind of happy to share always, a little insight that families and students might find helpful.
Josh, great. Thank you. Mary, we'll go to you next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary de Villiers. I serve as the Director of International Admissions for the University of Notre Dame. We are a medium-sized Catholic research university. We're located about 2 hours east by car from the city of Chicago. Our student body comes from all throughout the United States in more than 80 countries, and they are centered around the idea that is sort of the focus of our university, which is to be a force for good in the world. So in terms of the research opportunities, career development, and taking advantage of our incredible study abroad opportunities, we want to prepare you with the tools, the resources, and the network that will allow you to make that positive impact in your career field and or at your communities. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight.
All right, perfect. All right, let me stop sharing here. All right. So we will kick things off. Riley and Josh, maybe I'll start with you, just in terms of providing kind of a larger context in terms of, can you speak to kind of what AP courses actually are? Again, we'll start very broad and then we'll get a little bit more nuanced and specific, but just what AP courses are and kind of how they differ from like your typical kind of standard high school course. What's kind of the theory behind advanced placement courses?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely,
Rod, you want to take
Josh.
this one?
Yeah, I'll jump right in, Josh. Thank you so much. So I think, the main difference when I think about AP courses is it's an introductory college level class, right? The pace is going to be faster. The depth is going to be greater of the material you're studying, and then the assessments also are going to require more analysis, more writing, more foundational kind of conceptual understanding, less regurgitating information, less memorization, and more kind of applying concepts that you learn. I think what really differentiates APs in my mind isn't just difficulty, but it's that they're standardized nationally as well. So colleges have that kind of shared reference point as well. Josh, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no, the standardized kind of exam and curriculum, obviously when you compare it, especially for international students to like the IB or the A-level system for the UK, it's the American kind of response to that, especially if you have a kid, let's say like in Washington State and another one in Kentucky, and they're taking very, very different curriculum in ninth grade, especially 10th grade. It's hard to kind of say, what are you learning compared to each other? With the APs, it's standardized. That's what we mean by it. You can kind of know if someone gets a good grade in an AP class or a good score on an AP exam, kind of where they are. And of course, we're going to talk about kind of how you can build an AP curriculum to kind of stand out a little bit in the admissions process.
Great. And just kind of a follow-up question to that, and I'll throw this to the panel as a whole. But what if a student is coming from a school that is a non-AP school? And just to clarify what I mean by non-AP, it's a little jargony of a term, but schools that offer AP classes and an AP program, we generally consider as being an AP school. But there are schools out there that do not. We consider them kind of non-AP schools, and the reason why a school might choose to not offer an AP program is there are some hoops that all schools need to jump through to get that course certified by the College Board to be able to label it as an AP course. And there are schools throughout the country who just they want a little bit more flexibility in terms of their curriculum, what they're teaching, how they're teaching it. It doesn't mean that more advanced level course at their school is any in any way less rigorous. It's just they did not want to kind of go through the process of getting their teachers trained and getting certified by the college board to be able to label their class as or that particular class as an AP class. So certainly, there are schools out there or students out there that are applying from schools that are non-AP. So how is that transcript judged in terms of its rigor? How is it looked at? How do you even know for the college admission folk that they are coming from a quote non-AP school? Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because this is a question we get a lot from our families who are like, they feel like they're going to be disadvantaged in the college admission process because they do not have AP classes on their transcript, and it's solely because their school does not offer it. It's not like they're taking any less rigorous of a course load. But does someone want to jump in on that in terms of kind of how you know, how you evaluate it, kind of sort of the lens that you look at that through? Christie, you want to go
Sure,
or
I'm
start us
happy
off
to.
on this?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. One of my territories is New York City, and there's a lot of non-AP schools in New York City. So if anyone's on the call from that area, you might be super familiar with this. So I read tons of applications from non-AP schools. Northeastern receives over 100,000 applications every year, so we are admitting students from every sort of curriculum that you can imagine. So AP, non-AP, IB, Cambridge, like Josh mentioned, international curriculum. So I want to reassure you, a student can be competitive and admissible from all these experiences. From a school that we're calling non-AP, that is a very intentional decision that that school is making. And so I want to reassure you that if they are choosing to be a non-AP school, they are going to communicate that with to us as a university very, very clearly. They have very clear information on what is covered in the coursework. Some schools even share the syllabi, their school report, which in school profile, which you may be familiar with, which highlights what is exactly offered at the school, is going to be incredibly robust so that as we're reviewing those applications, we know that it's covering similar content, is as rigorous as an AP course, but it's just not branded as that. If a course is branded as AP, we can look at it a little bit quicker and know exactly what it covers. If it's a non-AP school, it just means we're going to spend a little bit more time on the application to make sure that we're fully understanding it, but the rigor can still be equally the same. Mary or Clara, I don't know if you have anything else to add from your institution.
Christie, perfect. Thank you. Clara.
The only thing I would add is that we're never going to penalize a student for taking a course that isn't available at their school. So if your school does not have AP calculus, but you have an honors calculus or advanced calculus, or that school profile tells us calculus is top level, we trust your school and we will take that into consideration. We're not going to penalize a student for not taking a course that's just simply not available at their school.
Perfect. Great. Josh, Riley, anything to add to that, Mary?
Just
I would say, oh, sorry.
no, go for it.
I would say there are a lot of schools that may offer just a small number of APs or they may have a cap on how many you can actually take because they feel that their coursework is as rigorous, if not more so. Just it depends on the school. And again, we go with what your school makes available to you. So again, please do not worry that you have to try to take a lot of things outside of that to impress us. We can see where you're going to school and what is offered.
Yeah, just to build on that, like there are schools out there where they'll say you cannot take an AP course until junior year or even maybe possibly senior year. And then at most you can only take two. And again, the college admission folk know that they're gonna, you're not going to be penalized because you didn't have 4 AP classes in senior year because they know that that was not an option for them. Riley, closing thought on this one?
Yeah, no, I just think the key term to remember to keep in mind is kind of rigor in context,
Yes.
right? So you're never going to be expected to have classes on your transcript that your school doesn't offer. And so if your school doesn't offer APs, they'll look at honors, dual enrollment, advanced electives, that kind of thing. Yeah, in context. So school context is important and know that admission officers have that information available to them. Yeah.
Great. Let's see. Next question around just kind of the benefits for families who are on the call where they're at an AP school and AP courses are an option for their students. just kind of what's the, what's the benefit to students in terms of, enrolling or taking these kind of more advanced AP classes? Josh, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, sure. So I obviously help kids, select courses kind of every year, and we talk about this in depth, right? Like, what is it going to look like to actually be in that AP class? Obviously, I took APs myself. I also did IB, so I have my kind of reference points. The first thing is just a lot more reading, right? A lot more reading intensive, a lot more writing intensive. Like Riley kind of mentioned earlier, there's more analysis. You have to make kind of like inferences based on previous readings and kind of show that you really, really understand the material, and whether that's in humanities, but honestly, also oftentimes in the AP Econ, micro, you see that in social sciences. Even on the STEM side, you have to be able to explain things very, very in detail. So it's not just like Riley said, like memorizing. I mean, maybe AP Bio you can get away with, like that's a little bit more of the memorizing stuff, but for the most part, it's really, really showing a high level understanding.
Right. And keep in mind, right, they're trying to mimic, college level work here. And then Clara, Christie, or Mary, just from the college admission sort of side of things, kind of benefits to students, not necessarily just in terms of, quote, getting into the particular university, but just in terms of kind of you getting a picture of who that student is academically. Mary, you want to go?
Sure. I would say that, we're going to see the rigor of the courses that you're taking. Each of us have universities here that, it's not that you just get in, it's also that you're prepared for the
Right.
next climb. And so that kind of preparation is going to set you up for success in terms of the ways that you have prepared yourself and built in really good habits with your studying and your learning.
Great. Clara, Christie, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add, I guess, as a benefit, it's not exactly the same, but a lot of schools, and I'm sure most people on the call are familiar, but as a reminder, you can receive college credit if you get
Right.
based on your exam score. So for us, it's a 4 or 5. Some schools also may include a 3.
Yeah, and we'll do a deeper dive a little bit later in terms of kind of the AP scoring scores and kind of how that can play a role too in terms of both college admission, but also, as you said, in terms of placement and things. Okay, great. Let's see. Moving on to kind of our next topic. So this is a common question that we get, like, how can families assess whether their child is ready for AP courses? Again, we know it's going to be a little bit of a leap in terms of rigor, in terms of expectations, in terms of pacing, and then kind of a sort of tangentially related to that, and how many courses are realistic in a given year. Let's see, Riley, you want to start us off on that discussion?
Yeah, no, just on the topic of kind of balancing APs and like mental health and making sure that students still have time in their life to sleep, and also potentially, do some extracurriculars. I think for me as a college counselor, overcommitment to APs is probably the most common mistake I see. I think students assume that more is better. They're really trying to compete with that valedictorian in their school. But in reality, the depth that they go into those classes and into those extracurriculars, if they're attached to those AP classes somehow, is more compelling than kind of AP overload. I read for many years in admission, and I think the students who load up on APs, often there's something to be desired in their activity profile, right? And so just kind of trying to balance that in a way that's authentic and true to the student, I think is the hardest kind of part of this decision-making process. Obviously the transcript matters a ton, but it's usually just a starting point for these kind of selective admission processes. So yeah, just balancing that is really important. Yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to elaborate a bit.
Yeah, I like to think of it like, obviously you guys talked about the restrictions that certain schools have on the number of APs, but let's imagine a world where like you can take as many as you want and there's no limitations. And one thing I will say is a lot of high schools have even introduced prerequisites, right? So, oh, you can't do AP Calc unless you've done honors pre-calc. So that's already one way to know. If you're in the honors classes in ninth and 10th grade or in advanced classes, then within your subject of kind of preference, it could make sense to explore APs. But what we see kind of issue is kids go from 10th grade to 11th grade and they think every single class has to be an AP, even in subjects they don't really particularly care about or not that good in. And then they're spending so much time just trying to like stay above water in those classes they don't really care about. And that's where you have to be very thoughtful about choosing the right number. Again, there is no magic number, right? Like I have seen kids with more than 10, and I've seen kids with one or two still have very, very good success because, like you said, the rest of the holistic profile is compelling.
Clara, I know you were gonna jump in here.
Yeah, I think my guidance here would depend on your year in school, but if you're in ninth or 10th grade, really think about your curriculum building year after year. So if you're in ninth grade and your school offers APs to 10th graders, maybe start with one or two, test it out, see how much reading it requires compared to a standard level course, and then go from there each year. And I would use as the resources that you can at school. Talk to your school counselors, talk to AP teachers if you can. Get as much information as possible as you're registering for classes for next year.
Oh, that's great advice. Christie or Mary, anything to add? All right. Let's see. We already kind of talked about this a little bit, but balancing demands, I think, that appropriate level of rigor and challenge is important. Like it is a holistic read and a holistic review. But for students who are feeling overwhelmed by their AP coursework, just kind of general advice to them in terms of managing it and making sure that they do have time for extracurriculars, that they do have time for sleep. Sacrificing sleep is not the solution. But Josh and Riley, I'll come back to you on this one. Kind of, when students are feeling overwhelmed, kind of, just advice you have for them, and also kind of what does it look like? I know it's kind of I'm framing it in kind of a general way,
Yeah, no,
but
for sure. So there's two ways to look at it. One is the course itself, right? Like doing well throughout the year, and then there's the exam period,
right.
right? So the biggest thing with the course is you just have to be consistent. So whether it's reading for the humanities or just like doing, the actual math and science and the STEM courses. And then what we often see is when kids prepare for tests or exams, usually it's like, oh, I prepare like a week out or like the week of. With APs, it's like 4 to 6 weeks out. You're already kind of starting to put together the study guide and review packets. And because it's a national, really an international exam at this point, right? It's offered all over the world. There's so many resources. Like there really are a lot of resources online. Obviously there's support with different kind of people that are there too. So you're not alone in it, right? And that sometimes can be a little bit reassuring.
Great. Riley, anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think Josh crushed it too. I just think, it's just want to say it's okay to recalibrate, right? Like early in the fall when you've selected your courses, be honest with yourself about what you think you can handle when you're looking at those syllabi. Um, I think colleges understand course correction better than they understand poor grades, right? And it's a sign of maturity and kind of self-advocacy to really recognize early what you're able to handle during those rigorous years. So yeah, just be thoughtful and be honest with yourself as you head into the school year. Yeah.
And then Clara, Christie, and Marielle, kind of a follow-up. Like I know for those students who attend AP schools that it does feel like there's a little bit of an arms race, like more AP, more AP, more AP, just kind of advice to families around that in terms of helping them maybe not get caught up in that.
I was just giving this advice to a friend of mine's son because he's going into his junior year and he was starting to feel a lot of pressure from his friends. And he asked me about AP music theory. And I said, well, are you in the band? Like, because that arms race starts early, or at least that feeling of it, especially among the students. And he said, no, I'm not going to be in the band. And I said, then why would you have that? Like, I think you have to remember to think of this as your preparation for the next level of your education. We like to see well-roundedness in that preparation. A lot of us are coming from very comprehensive universities. And so when we're looking at your transcript, we want to see that we can tell your preparation is there to be successful at our institution academically. So try to keep that in mind, that it's not the quantity, it's the overall quality of your preparation.
Great. Mary, thank you. Clara or Christie, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add is that it's really a balancing act too, in addition to, focusing on things you actually care about. You don't want to take so many APs and then all of a sudden you're struggling in the courses, right? And like Josh said, there's no magic number, but it's that balancing act of making sure that you're challenging yourself where appropriate, but you are still giving yourself that time to breathe and enjoy things outside the classroom and also not hurt yourself academically at the same time.
Great. Clara, anything to add here?
The only thing I would add is to try not to compare yourself or your student to others. I know it's hard to believe, but we're never putting two applications right next to each other and saying, well, this student had one more AP, so they're the one we have to admit. That just doesn't happen in admission committees. We're really looking at your application in the context of your school, but not comparing you to other students at your school or other schools in the area.
Clara, thank you. No, that's a great point. All right, moving on to our next topic, kind of the role of APs in college admissions, because I know we get lots and lots of questions around this. So just how do you view, or your institution views, the role of AP coursework and exam scores in a student's, application? Kind of what lens are you looking at that through? Christie, you want to start us off here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we've already been touching on, when we're looking at an application and we're speaking specifically about the academics piece, there's a few things that we're looking at. We're looking at your grades, the individual grades that you're receiving in the classes, but also the subjects that you're taking and the rigor of the coursework. And so, for this conversation, we're really talking about the core, which APs are you choosing to select and the rigor of it. And of course, taking APs is going to be rigorous. For Northeastern, we actually do not look at the AP exams at all in the review process. So if you get a 4 or 5 on the exam and you've been admitted and you're committed to the university, that summer between senior year and freshman year of college, you can send those scores in and receive college credit, but we do not look at those exams at all in the review process. So we're only looking at AP through the lens of the rigor. Are you challenging yourself? Are you taking those higher level, more college prep classes, college level courses? So that's where that really comes into play. The other thing I'll add is that generally universities, when we're looking at coursework, is we're looking at the 5 core subjects. So math, science, foreign language, history, and science. I lost track. Thank you. So when you're thinking about taking APs, if you're looking at those core subjects, those are going to also carry a little bit more weight as far as rigor goes versus maybe taking AP personal finance. Of course, that is still rigorous. It's a great thing to add into your coursework, but we're going to view, an AP Calc or an AP English to be a bit more challenging than an AP personal finance. So yeah, I believe that UVA and Notre Dame might view it differently, but that's
Yeah, so keep in mind in terms of the roles of AP scores on the actual exams themselves, because as Josh mentioned, right, there's 2 parts. There's one, how did you do in the class day in and day out in that AP class, which is the grade that's going to appear on your transcript. And then there's the how did you do on that one shot 3 to 3.5 hour exam that's going to be on that 1 through 5 scoring scale. And different institutions have different policies in terms of how they view those AP exam scores specifically. But Mary, you want to speak to this?
Sure. So at Notre Dame, we use the expression the quantitative evidence. So students, when you're self-reporting your AP scores, you control what you're reporting. And the things that you report to us, if you do choose to submit an SAT or ACT score along with AP scores that you're self-reporting in your application, we'll see that as quantitative evidence. So let's say you're applying for one of our STEM fields, and we see that you have done quite well in AP exams related to STEM. It gives us a lot of assurance that the preparation that you're receiving in your high school is going to serve you well when you get to Notre Dame. So that's usually how we will use those scores.
Great. Clara?
Yeah, Drew, I would just echo what you said. The AP exam is a moment in time, and sometimes you do great on the exam and you feel like it's a good reflection of your academic abilities, and sometimes you wake up on exam day and you're under the weather, you had something happen in your family. Sometimes that moment in time is not the best moment in time for you to be taking that exam, but that's when it's scheduled. And your transcript gives us years of information. It tells us how you're showing up in classes day in and day out. So if you get an AP exam score that you're not thrilled about, it's really not the end of the world because that transcript is the most important academic piece of information for us.
Clara, that's great. And thanks for providing that context a little bit, because I do feel sometimes our students, obviously it's a chance for them to show off a little bit. Like if you can go in and put your best foot forward on it, like why not? But as you said, I think it's reassuring to students to hear that, it's, we frame it as like, what happens if you're in an AP course? And, clearly the college admission folks see that you're in the AP course and that there's no AP exam score that was also sent in. So, Clara, I think you touched on this, but Christy, you want to add to that too,
Uh,
in terms of how you view that?
I'm so sorry. I was actually answering a question in the chat box.
Oh yeah, no worries. No, the question is like, okay,
Yeah.
student has, for instance, AP US history
Yeah.
junior year, right? They got an A in the class. They maybe even got a letter of recommendation from that teacher being like, the student was great, interactive, like really a strong student in our class, had a strong voice, always came prepared. But then there's no AP exam score, right?
Oh, yeah,
So to
yeah.
Claire's point, like maybe they had an off day, but just how do you kind of view that, just to kind of reassure our students a little bit who are on this
Yeah,
call?
absolutely. You know what's funny is I was actually that was the type of question I was answering in the chat box. So we can only we can only assess an application based off the information that's provided to us.
Right.
So if something is not explicitly shared, we cannot make any assumptions. We all know the phrase about assumptions. It's the same with applications, right? So if a AP exam is not provided, I also think test scores like SAT, ACT at a test optional school, it's the same thing. If we don't have that information, we don't think about it. At least at Northeastern, that's how we function because we want to make sure that we're ethical and we're not inserting opinions or making assumptions about a situation that we don't know the details on.
Perfect. Clara, something to add there?
I agree with Christy, and I'll be totally honest with you all. I don't have a lot of time to speculate most of
Right.
the time. I'm just going to take the information that you choose to provide, and we'll make the best assessment that we can.
Yeah, that's perfect. They're not going to try to guess, right, what that score may have been. They don't have time for that. And then just any recent trends that you all are seeing in ter in terms of kind of the AP landscape, students taking it, submitting scores, not submitting scores. Mary, anything kind of that jumps out at you around this? I know the College Board, for a little bit of context behind this question, the College Board has put a lot of time and effort and resources into developing their AP sort of program and reaching out to schools to offer those AP classes and things. So Mary, just any trends kind of you're seeing in terms of that?
Um, I would say that I think the self-reporting is definitely something that students are maybe positioning themselves to use to their best advantage in terms of the scores that they are reporting. But for us, I mean, just like what Clara said, if it's not there, it's not something that I'm gonna like think about or have time to speculate about because we have such a volume of applications. But I would say that is something noticeable this year is that we'll see that students are taking these AP courses in their high school, but they're selective about which scores they're reporting.
Great. Josh and Riley, things you're seeing as you're working with students?
Yeah, obviously the one big thing is students taking AP exams for classes that they're not enrolled in, right?
Yeah, we'll
And
circle back to this.
yeah, so I mean it's a trend. It's a trend. So we'll come back to it. We'll just come back to it. But yeah, that's that's
Yeah,
that's one for
yeah.
sure.
Riley, in terms of the students you're working with.
Yeah, no, same thing. I think more students taking APs earlier, and not really understanding what that entails. But yeah, same as Josh, otherwise.
Perfect. And then Josh and Riley, I'll stay with you on this one, but this is a question we get a lot in terms of like, what if I don't get a 4 or 5? Should I submit my scores? And I can open this up to everyone too. Just again, it's going to be a contextual read. Like this
Exactly.
is right. It's going to be dependent on your student, kind of the course load they've taken, things like that. But just any kind of general guidelines around, whether to submit scores or not.
Yeah, of course. And it's always helpful hearing, Clara kind of mentioned that like we're not going to speculate. There's like kind of that natural human nature to be like, if I don't submit, does it look like I
Right.
failed? Right? Does it look like a one or a two? If I got a three, and that's where I say, like you said, contextually, if someone has a few fours and a few fives, like one three isn't going to make someone go like, well, those fours and fives are now void, right? It's like, okay, like that's one test. And I usually say there's no kind of shame in that. Realistically, or one or two obviously doesn't look very
Right.
favorable. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Like hopefully you have the grades to kind of balance it out. And in that case, I probably would not submit it. But yeah, a three is always that
Right.
kind of like, do I do it or not? And then if I take five exams, I got five threes. Again, you got to realize, okay, maybe that's just the level that I'm at, and that's okay. And you kind of readjust your goals based on the data that you do have.
Yeah, and good for you, right? You sat for 5 AP exams. That's not an easy thing to do, over the course of your high school career. Like they're long, they're draining. Let's see, Mary, anything to add to this one in terms of how you view it or recommendations for families? All right. All right. Great. All right. So this is another common question, and we've kind of mentioned this, but I do want to kind of address it more directly. So, under the idea of AP subject selection and major alignment. So, Christie, someone already mentioned this, but are specific AP subjects considered more valued depending on a student's intended major, or is it more about kind of overall academic, rigor? So just when students are thinking about taking APs, like how much should they have in mind in terms of a potential major? Does it matter? Or is if it's just something they might be interested in? But
Yeah, I'll quickly jump on this one. So, what we do see is, and again, I hate to kind of put kids into like STEM categories and humanities categories and whatnot, but let's say someone wants engineering. You just need to know, and of course, there's 4,000 plus universities. We have like three phenomenal universities represented here today, and everyone's a little bit different. But if we're talking selective universities, just know that the competition for engineering will likely get to, there's AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, AP Physics C, right? There's two kinds of AP Physics Cs. There's obviously AP Calc AB and Calc BC. So there's levels. There's essentially levels that you can kind of get to. And that's what I think is something that you want to consider. Like, all right, if I want to do into engineering, I know that if my school offers APs, that's going to be probably the most challenging pathway from a course load standpoint, right? So just keeping that in mind, and if you're on the humanities front, maybe it's just more, okay, you have US history, but you also have AP Euro, AP World, right? If I majored in history, naturally, I took all the AP histories available because I just wanted to learn about them. It just made sense to me. So you always have to kind of follow your actual interests. Riley.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, no, I just want to kind of echo that, I guess. I think alignment throughout your sort of narrative, throughout your file will always help. And kind of like Josh was alluding to, a prospective engineering student without calc, without physics, it just raises questions, right? And we want to avoid raising questions. We want to answer those questions in your application file. I think, a prospective doctor without chem, maybe like, there's some kind of obvious choices, I think, in there that like we want to show an interest in these subjects if we intend to pursue this major or this career. So I think be thoughtful about that. But in general, I think rigor and consistency matters more than hyper like specialization. But we want to avoid raising questions, and we want to obviously explore the fields that will benefit us going forward. Yeah.
great. Riley, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, Clara, thoughts on this one in terms of from the college admission perspective?
Yeah, so at UVA, we admit to different schools and colleges, but the vast majority of our students are not coming in with a specific major. And when we're looking at your high school curriculum, we also want you to get to college and to be able to change your mind. To say, hey, I wanted to be a doctor, but now I'm interested in data science. Maybe statistics and economics are better preparation. Usually, if you have a wider breadth of courses in high school and AP courses, you are more able to pivot like that once you get to college and really realize all of the majors and all of the careers that could potentially be available to you. So another reason to definitely, pursue the APs and what you're most passionate about, but try not to over specialize at the high school level.
Great. Christie, I think you talked about this a little bit earlier, but do you want to add your thoughts to this one?
Yeah, no, I think Claire, I actually literally Claire was just writing down what you said because I liked how well you worded it. Yes, so we're looking for well-rounded students. It's once again that balancing act of taking subjects in a variety of areas, but also leaning into the things that you're excited about. I think one example is like foreign language. I don't think everyone is always passionate about being fluent in Spanish, for example, in college. So maybe that might be a good subject to drop to then maybe double up on taking two sciences or two of those humanities. So once again, it's really that balance. And this is a really great conversation to have with your college counselors because they're really the experts on being able to, because they know you best. And so don't feel like you need to do this alone, whether that's leaning on your counselors or family members, making that decision together.
Perfect. Mary, closing thoughts on this one?
I just the way that we approach it is we're looking to see, when you get to a university like Notre Dame or UVA or Northeastern, you're going to be taking many different kinds of classes to satisfy our core. So even if you're not in STEM, you're still going to have some STEM classes. So it's just really looking at that overall preparation and making sure that you're going to be someone that can plant roots and flourish at our universities when you get there.
Great. All right, Josh, we'll go back to you on this one. You kind of mentioned this in the beginning a little bit, but can you just share specific strategies or tools that consistently lead to success for students preparing for AP exams? So the AP exam, it's 3 to 3.5 hours. There's multiple choice sections. There's free response questions. It is not just like your end of chapter review test that kind of most students are typically taking in their sort of day in and day out. It's kind of think of it as like a midterm, but a midterm possibly on steroids there. So Josh, just kind of general things for students to think about, just so they get a chance to show off a little bit and they feel confident going into that test.
Yeah, of course. And, we understand that people who are joining this call are obviously like pretty invested in their education or their child's education, right? So that's usually going to be quite fruitful down the line, like continue to kind of invest time. And the same thing with AP exams, it's just time and preparation, right? So whether it's throughout the course, like I said, making sure that you're keeping up to date, talking to your teachers, man, like the office hours, even if they don't have office hours, just like knocking on their door and being like, hey, this unit, I'm not able to kind of explain everything thoroughly. And that's what you want. You want to be able to kind of be consistently showing that you understand things throughout the year. And then of course, when it comes time to revision, whether it's workshops, whether it's group kind of studying and being able to like explain to people different concepts. And again, whether it's languages, humanities, math, that's what you're going to be able to do is in your essays, in the free response questions, and it's explained. And the big one is especially like the DBQs, right? Like I remember that with the history ones where you can be given kind of anything and you have to connect the dots and then explain with like a proper thesis, what it is you're explaining, right? So essentially being able to show understanding beyond just knowing the facts, knowing the details, knowing the important kind of players, it's why it all matters. And that's where I think they do a great job of kind of replicating the college, dynamic. Same thing in university. When you're writing a midterm paper or final paper, you have to be able to explain everything and connect the dots. So that's when you can feel confident going into an AP exams. And that's why it takes a lot of time.
Riley, something to add there?
Yeah, no, Josh crushed it. I think timed writing drills, you know what I mean? Sometimes in class, your teacher will prepare you better than sometimes other teachers, right? That's just the way life works. But I think timed writing drills, practicing with past exams, right, that have been released, trying to see what was on the test last year. Like, can I access this? Can I study it with my friends in a study group? Structured, right? Not just social time, but I think those three I think are the things that help students the most. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterating to our students on the call, like Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, right? These classes are supposed to be challenging, right? It's a great way for you to practice some self-advocacy, to reach out to your professor if you're struggling. They are not going to look negatively or down on you that you are struggling. That's kind of the whole point of this, of these AP classes, is to expose you to college level work, to challenge you, to have you struggle a little bit, and to see kind of how you deal with that struggle. But Clara, Christie, Mary, anything to add on that front? All right.
I'll just quickly say that we're long past the days of like, oh, I didn't even study for that.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
no, that doesn't happen on APs. Like and we also don't believe you, right? So let's just make sure that that's very, very, very clear. You get a lot of points for yourself for studying for the AP exams.
Yes, I joke it's like doing a roller coaster no-handed. Like you do not get extra credit for that. Like hang on to the guardrail, get as much support and help as you need. You do not get to put when you submit your AP score, if you submit it, again, underscore choice, you decide whether to submit it or not. There's no way to mark like, oh, by the way, I didn't study at all for this, and look, I got a 5. So clearly I'm ready for college level work. All right, Christy, we'll come back to you for this. You started us off on this, just kind of credit, college credit, and kind of how colleges, different ways that colleges use, the actual AP exam scores. So, Christy, I know you started in the beginning to mention this a little bit, but can you just walk us through that again in terms of different ways that AP scores are used, keeping in mind
Yeah,
that different institutions have different policies?
yeah, absolutely. So, like we talked about at the top of the call, these are essentially college level coursework offered in a high school setting. So, because of that, depending on the score that you receive on the AP exam, you can receive college credit at university. So, as I mentioned before, if students receive a 4 or a 5 on the AP exam, while we aren't looking at that for admissions, you will receive college credit for that over at the university, which is really fantastic. So, for example, maybe you get a 5 in your AP English class that will transfer over to the university and you'll be placed out of English 101, for example, and you can start with English 102. The great thing about that is it gives you a little bit more freedom and flexibility in your coursework. So it might not mean that at some schools, you might be able to jump into all those 102 classes right away. And other times you might not feel that flexibility or that additional coursework day one, but it'll give you more time to add on a minor, easier to double major, take a semester to study abroad. So in general, it can be a really great asset. We get a lot of questions in my institution about exactly how it's going to transfer. At the application phase, that would be too much work for us to be able to say for every single student, this is exactly how it's going to transfer. But most schools have a blanket policy where it's just like, if you get that 4 or 5, rest assured, at the applicant phase, we can't tell you exactly how you'll get credit, but you will. And then if you decide to attend over the summer, your academic advisor will be able to do that more individualized assessment and share with you exactly what that will look like.
Perfect. Mary, in terms of your institutions, in terms of just additional, other outside of just seeing it on the application, but the way your institution sort of handles AP scores.
Yeah, so for a 4 or a 5, you can expect that you will get some form of credit. And at Notre Dame, what it does, it's not going to eliminate a general requirement for the university, but it will, as Christy mentioned, it will bump you up. So it does create really great pockets of time and flexibility. And I think that when you get to university, you don't quite understand what you may be wanting to do with that wonderful freedom of time. But as you start taking more and more things on and maybe thinking about new minors or moving into a second major, or maybe you are changing your major and you've got to do a little bit of backfilling, it is nice to have that flexibility.
Great. Clara?
Yeah, I think we're pretty transparent about this at UVA. If you Google UVA AP credit, you'll see a list of AP courses, scores, and how you would potentially get credit for that at UVA. Google different universities, look at their FAQ pages on the admission websites. You can always call admission offices. There's usually someone on call during the day, during business hours, and admission officers, we're here to help. We're happy to answer your questions.
Perfect. Yeah, and college admission folk, as hopefully you're getting a sense of, like they're really nice, great, friendly people. Like they love like talking to students. So, students can also, they can always reach out. But as Christie or as Clara said, oftentimes you can find that kind of information, online and student and colleges will publish what their policies are. All right, last couple minutes we have. So I know, Josh, you mentioned this earlier, so I do want to circle back to this, but I'm just interested in getting everyone's perspective on this quickly. But for students attending schools not offering AP classes, right? What are your thoughts on taking AP exams without having taken an AP course? Because that's kind of the other trend, I think, or arms race that students who don't who are at non-AP schools, they're suddenly feeling a lot of pressure that to stay competitive, that they need to at least have AP exams on their transcript or to take them if if their school offers them and they're given the opportunity to do that. So I just love quickly to get people's thoughts on this because I know this can cause a lot of angst for students, especially on those non-AP schools. Clara, you want to start us off here?
Sure, I'm happy to. So if you've taken economics in school, you've probably learned about trade-offs and opportunity costs. And I always think of this as a trade-off. You could study to take one of these exams independently, but at what cost? Every hour spent studying for an AP exam when you're not in the AP course is an hour that you can't spend doing something else that could be academically fulfilling, personally fulfilling, something that's doing good in your school community or your local community. So I would really think about it that way before you rush to sign up for a bunch of AP exams that we're not expecting you to take if those aren't the courses offered at your school.
Clara, thank you. Let's see, Mary or Christy, anything to add to that?
No, I think Clara nailed it.
I was taking notes again, so I agree.
And Josh and Riley, what are you seeing just working with students, like
Yeah, I mean,
in
again,
terms
I
of the
just
pressures that they feel like they're under? And again, trying to reassure
exactly.
them a little bit.
And and I do tend to work with a lot of kids who, consider themselves high achieving and very, very ambitious. So they feel like Clara mentioned, oh, this is an opportunity to stand out. And I'm telling them like, one or two APs they know that there's no kind of you might have to travel like 5 hours to take it on like a random weekday. It's just like a real hassle. And like you said, that time you can be spending like there are many, many different ways, more unique ways to stand out, right? And to show that you're a scholar, you can do research independently and you can write, you can, you know, lead all kinds of activities. Obviously, we know that things that you can do with the time. So it doesn't always feel worthwhile. But of course, there are some
Right.
cases. And again, as someone who did IB and AP, like the reason I did not do full IB is because I really wanted to take AP US history. And they said, well, the IB doesn't have US history. So it's like, okay, I guess I'm doing IB certificates and then a number of APs. And then when you look at the overall transcript, it kind of just made sense. So you have to do what's right for you. It's what always comes down to like trying to replicate other people's profile or rigor. It just leaves you, at a disadvantage just personally, not necessarily in the process, just the cost of kind of putting all that into it.
Right. Riley, closing thought on that one?
Yeah, no, just want to echo that idea that like that hour that you spent studying for this exam to get this score that we're not really sure how much is going to matter, like that could be invested maybe in something more meaningful, more authentic. Self-studying shows initiative, right? But it doesn't make up a rigorous full year AP course. It's not the same thing. My kind of metric for students when when I'm working with students is, is this something you're genuinely interested in, or is this because you want to like position yourself well for the application? And if they're genuinely interested and they want to study those things for themselves, that's the deciding factor for me. Let's not do it to give the admission officers what they because they want to find you, right? They want to look for you on the application. So maybe we could spend that time better if it's not authentic in that way.
Great, Riley, thank you. All right, we are heading to the Q&A portion, but as I bring the questions up, I think we're going to launch just a closing poll, and then we'll have some time for questions. But as I bring them up, just real quickly, we'll round robin this. Clara, any kind of just closing thoughts on this topic tonight or closing message for everyone on this call?
I I think closing for me would be that there's a lot of value in AP courses and the challenge that you're taking in high school, how that prepares you for university, potentially getting credit at some colleges and universities, but at the same time, the AP exam scores are not the end all be all of your application. We're getting a lot more academic information from your transcript, and of course, complementing that with the other parts of your application. So I would certainly keep, if you're in ninth, 10th, 11th grade, keep taking the hardest classes available to you, keep challenging yourself, showing that you're really preparing for college, but at the same time, don't stress about one exam or one course, especially if it's not available at your school.
Great. Mary.
Yes, I saw a question in the chat and I thought I would maybe build that into mine. So building off of what Clara said, there are so many different kinds of high schools all throughout the United States offering many different kinds of advanced course opportunities. If you have AP offered and you can take those courses, that's wonderful. But if your school is offering you something else that is just as rigorous, let's say dual enrollment or IB or what have you, like take advantage of those opportunities. And we all are going to view what is available to you that is very rigorous in your school. We're going to keep that in context when we're reading your application.
Great. Christie.
To build off of Mary, I also seen some questions in the chat that were making me think. We have gotten some questions about choosing. So you might be in a situation where you actually have the opportunity to choose between dual enrollment or AP, or maybe your school offers IB also. If you are in a situation where you can choose which these courses, we view them all as rigorous. At most institutions, you are eligible for college credit depending on the result that you get in each of these models. So don't stress too much on which one will be viewed as best on your college application. A dual enrollment versus an IP versus a AP class, they're all different structures. They're going to cover slightly different content and it's going to be taught in different ways. So if you are deciding, think about which one of those approaches is going to best align with your interests and how you learn best. Because rest assured, they'll all be viewed as rigorous on your application.
Perfect. Josh.
Yeah, no, I always want to think about, authenticity more than anything. And, the academic kind of course selection is one way to show authenticity. Obviously, if you're someone that is always going to push themselves, and you can perform at a high level while handling the rigor, good for you. That's great. And if pushing yourself, you realize, wow, I pushed too hard, I need to kind of step back a little bit. That doesn't mean you're not going to go to college. But that's the point, is that college is literally for everyone. Like, you will find the right fit school for you. And the AP is a good way to know, okay, like maybe I was just kind of overdoing it. Maybe I don't need to apply to Stanford. Like, that's okay, right? And realizing that there's going to be a right curriculum for you, in high school and in college as well.
All right, Riley.
Yeah,
Closing
no, I
thoughts here.
think like a few takeaways. Rigor in your on your transcript is contextual, right? It's based on the school you're at, the offerings there. Colleges admit students, not the amount of APs that you've taken. They admit full people, full humans. And yeah, challenge yourself, but do so thoughtfully and do so sustainably, because your health is what's ultimately the most important. Yeah, I think that's it.
Perfect. Anyone else have anything to add? And then we'll start diving into the questions. All right. Again, just a huge thanks to the panel, but we do have some time for questions. So this is a question we always get, and so I want to fire it out to you. All right. So through the college admission lens, right? Which one's better, right? The B, or maybe a slightly lower grade in like the AP most rigorous course, or maybe taking a slightly easier, less rigorous path, knowing that you can get that A, in terms of just like how should students think about that? I feel like we get, every time we run this webinar, I feel like we get this question. So I'd love to have your kind of take on that. Anyone want to start us off on this one? Christie, you want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a balancing act, right? And so I think that if there are courses that you are excited about, that you think you can do well in, then that's where you should be challenging yourself with the AP. I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. You don't want to overload yourself with so many APs, though, that it starts to academically hurt you at the same time. Um, if you have one B on an application is not going to hurt anybody. Two Bs in AP classes is not going to hurt anything. It's really more if you are getting like C's in all APs because you're overloaded
Right.
too much. So that's really where you need to think strategically about where am I going to invest my time and my energy. Like I think Josh mentioned this before. If you don't love history, then don't take an AP history because that's not a class that you're likely going to succeed in. In that case, you might be better to be more in an honors or a college prep. At the end of the day, an A is an A is an A. And so you want to set yourself up to do as best as you can. And that could be a combo of AP and non-AP classes.
Great. Anyone have anything to add to that, Christy? Thank you. All right.
Oh,
Yep. Go ahead, Mary.
I will share. I think it depends on the universities that you are applying to. But if you are at a school where grades are weighted based on if you're taking the
Right.
AP course or the honors course, that is something to keep in mind is that sometimes where you may fall in terms of in the class, and I know for certain states that like a lot of the public schools have mandated ranking if you're above a certain percentage, just something to consider, something to keep in mind, because some of those numbers can be part of that overall holistic review process.
Great. And I will say too, and Mary, maybe you can add, like sometimes during the admissions process, like colleges will unweight that GPA. So by weighting, what it means is if you take like an AP course, they add like a certain amount of points essentially to that GPA in recognizing that it's an AP course, maybe a little bit more rigorous. But there are colleges that will then unweight that GPA and kind of recalculate it. So keep that in mind. For some institutions, if you have a B in an AP class, even though on your transcript it shows up as an A, in terms of calculating the GPA, it might very well still come back as a B when the college admission officers are reading it. But I think again, looking at all this contextually and taking a balanced approach is a good way of thinking about that. And then can we just quickly, I got a question around like kind of building rigor and maybe not, as students are going through their high school career, maybe they added rigor kind of later on in the process. But can someone just speak to kind of how you view that again with that contextual read, just again to try to reassure students maybe that they don't have to, ninth grade, they don't have to suddenly enroll in like every AP class imaginable, but they can kind of build their transcript up as they go. So Josh, you want to address this one?
Yeah, well, as we know, studies have shown that boys tend to mature at a maybe a little slightly different rate than girls in the high school level. So we see this a lot, right? Where in ninth and 10th grade, kids just aren't mature enough to handle the workload of not even just APs, like advanced classes. And then something happens halfway through high school. They kind of hear that 11th grade's more intense and they're kind of ready to take that on. And I do think, again, from my side, that you get credit for that, right? As opposed to kind of showing growth. Like that's actually, you can tell people, oh, I grew up, I matured. One way is, oh, wow, you went from like not having really challenging courses to all of a sudden you did have them and you did well in them. Okay, you grew up. So I do think there's always kind of hope. It's not about, oh, again, doing that math. And someone mentioned the UK universities. And to be truthful, like UK universities will say we want 5.5s. It's like just on the requirements page. And that can be a little bit daunting. Therefore, for some kids, it might make sense to kind of try to spread that out and figure out when you can get 5.5s, which is almost nearly impossible, to be honest. So from my 2 cents, it's just like, don't panic if in ninth grade you saw someone else in an AP class at your school and now you feel like you're behind them the whole time. You're not. You have plenty of time to catch up.
Great. Christy, something to add to there?
No, I think that that's spot on. There are some high schools that are offering AP courses in grades 9 and 10.
Right.
I want to point out that that is not the standard. I
Right.
think that that is more of a unique, that is not the most common. Generally, in most applicants, we are seeing a heavy level of APs in grades 11 and 12. So if it's an option for you, awesome. And take everything that we're talking about into consideration and strategically decide if they're the right fit for you. But also rest assured that most of the time we're seeing these more heavily in grades 11 and 12.
Great. Great. Perfect. All righty. Let's see. Again, the poll is up. If you want us to reach out to you directly, feel free to fill out the poll, but you can, of course, always reach out to us as well. All right. So my goal was 8 o'clock on this. It is 8:03, so we will call that a win. But again, just a huge shout out and thanks to Riley, Mary, Josh, Clara, and Christie for taking the time tonight and sharing their expertise. Again, we have recorded this. We'll try to get the link out to the recording to you tomorrow or on Friday. And also feel free, if you have friends or colleagues who you think would be interested in this, definitely feel free to forward that link on to them. But again, just a huge thanks to the panel again. I hope you found this informational and helpful for you. But thanks so much again, everybody, for joining us this evening. We so appreciate your taking the time. All right, thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening. All right, take care.